Okay, 3, 2, count. We're here live in the Federal News Network newsroom on a huge day. I, Jeffrey Walensky, publisher of Federal News Network, am here with the authority, Jason Miller, the executive editor for Federal News Network, as we are on the last business day of federal fiscal 2023. The reason we're here, federal government shutdown countdown is on right now. Jason, I want to come to you real big with the question of today, which is, where do we stand with what is looming of a government shutdown?
We stand with a lot of anxiety right now because I think a lot of federal employees, federal contractors are waiting with bated breath for what will Congress do. Congress has till midnight on Sunday, 12 o'clock a.m. to pass a funding bill where the government will shut down. Now, what this means is basically agencies will, if you're not accepted, you don't, anything that's not national security related. So yes, the Transportation Security Administration will continue to process passengers. Yes, Medicaid, Medicare will still work. Yes, Social Security Administration will continue to send checks out. But anything non-essential, I just read this morning that the Interior Department has announced they're going to close all national parks, or maybe a majority of the national parks. People who are going, oh, I'm going to go on vacation, don't go to a national park because you may not get in on Monday or maybe even on Sunday.
So here at Federal News Network, our mission is to help the federal employee deliver on their mission. You talked a little bit about things that will still happen, those essential types of things, but there's a lot of things that won't happen. One of them is a bunch of people aren't going to have to go to work on Monday, or maybe they have to go to work and then get instructions after that. What is really the inner workings of how a government shutdown works for those people that rely on Federal News Network each day to get the news of what's happening in their agency?
About a week ago, the Office of Management and Budget held a call, said, okay, we were about a week away from a shutdown. I'm going to get nerdy here, so bear with me. I know you love me when I get nerdy. Circular A11 talks about what do you do when you have a lapse in appropriations. And the first thing that happens basically is lots of planning. So over the last week, I've talked to a deputy CFO at an agency, a large agency. I've talked to a CIO at a large agency. And beyond the few odds and ends they have to do to keep things running, everything's been about planning. What stays on, what stays off, what can be kind of put on hold, what projects. And I think one of the big things that's happening today is agencies sent out notices yesterday to their employees to say, prepare for a shutdown, begin that process in earnest. Not that they haven't been doing anything previously, but the second thing we're told is we're going to start working on furloughs. Do those notices go out today? Maybe for some agencies. Do they go out Monday or over the weekend? Possibly. But on Monday, a lot of agencies, a lot of employees will have to report to their office, and what they'll do is call it orderly shutdown activities. It's roughly about 3 to 4 hours of the work to put everything away, to turn things off, to say, okay, here's how we're going to do this going forward. And then you also know if you'll be furloughed or not. And if you're not furloughed, you have to come to the office. You're deemed accepted, and neither accepted or non-accepted employees will get paid until the shutdown ends. Now, the good news here, because a lot of people want to know about that paycheck issue, is everyone will get paid, federal employees, at the end of the shutdown, whenever that happens.
So you brought up a lot of things. You're a little bit ahead of us. Let's get to Monday. First of all, Monday, do you have to come in? Or if you're a teleworker, how will those instructions be delivered to people? Because I foresee a situation where people come in on Monday, especially those of us in the DC area. Federal News Network, we're standing right here looking into Washington, DC, thinking it creates a traffic situation. Everybody comes in and goes back out. Hopefully they're listening to WTOP on their way home or something like that, right? But you come in and they tell you if you're going to be working. So can you know in advance if I'm going to be one of those people that's working, not working? What does that look like?
For a lot of agencies, the answer is, unfortunately, it depends.
Okay.
Some agencies are better at communicating than others. Some people know, hey, I went through that shutdown in 2018 and 2019 or in 2013. I know that I'm an accepted person, so I will come work. There are other agencies that don't follow the government calendar in terms of appropriations. One good example is the General Services Administration. A strong majority of their employees will be working no matter what because they're fee funded. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service and the Homeland Security Department, a lot of those folks are fee funded, so they will be working. For those people who are not fee funded, who do rely on appropriations, they'll get notices again today, Saturday, potentially Monday when they walk in, and they're told you are accepted or non-accepted. And if you're not accepted, do your orderly shutdown, take those 3 to 4 hours, and then head back home and then wait until Congress does their job.
Now, a lot of what we're talking about is speculation. Today, we stand here in the Federal News Network newsroom. It's Friday, and Friday to Monday, a lot can happen. Where do we stand right now with Congress, the appropriations, the passing of bills. How long do those things even take when they come to a conclusion or even to vote on a conclusion? It's only Friday. Monday's a long ways away.
Well, first of all, we got to throw the shout out to Mitchell Miller at WTOP. He's on top of this. So if you really want to get into the weeds, follow Mitchell Miller and WTOP. But sure. Enough of the shameless plug there. I will offer what we know today, what we know right this moment is there's two separate bills working through the Congress. Senate has a bill that is a more typical continuing resolution. It would extend the government through November 17th. It would also deal with certain things like the FAA has some programs that are going to expire. They're going to reauthorize those programs. It would put money in for Ukraine, supporting Ukraine in the war against Russia. It would also put money in for disaster relief. We've seen a lot of disasters come up. Maui fire is an example, others. So that's the Senate bill. It has bipartisan support. Then you have the House bill. House bill is much more delicate. The House is trying to pass all their appropriation bills. They pass defense. They pass a few others. Just last night, I just read the Agriculture Department bill did not get through. They also have a continuing resolution that they're putting on the floor today that would only extend the government through October 31st. Halloween's gets spooky on October 31st. Perfect. And that bill, unfortunately, is not very supportive of Democrats because in the White House has said they would probably not sign the bill. It wants to do an 8% cut for all non-defense, not VA, not disaster relief funding. Now, the challenge there is an 8% cut. That's a big cut when you're working under a CR. We're not talking about an 8% cut over the year, but whatever that month is, agencies could not cut their budgets by 8% just like that. I was talking to one friend who's a lobbyist, and he says they'd have to hire somebody just to figure out where to cut that 8%, and it would take them a month to hire the person just to get that process started. So it's a non-starter, I think, on Capitol Hill.
And Jason, you've mentioned a number of things about hiring people or doing things with essentially what would become contractors. And this doesn't just affect the federal employee, it affects the contractor as well. I know that there's a number of questions coming in on LinkedIn, and we have a lot of contractors with us. We're going to get to some of these questions. One of the things we're talking about here is communication. I'll first communicate. Federal News Network will be fully operational this entire time. You can stay with us. Everything is posted on the website, is the first place to go, federalnewsnetwork.com, for any of the key information. Be part of our email newsletter for breaking news and information about what happens here, and to participate in polls. We had a poll that closed, I think it was yesterday, about some key questions. Where are federal employees' heads at as we enter into this? And one of those key pieces was about communication. Only 48%, less than half of the people that answered the poll, said that they'd been communicated with by their agency leadership of what happens. Talk a little bit about that communication. Will they get communication after the 30th? If it keeps going, how does that communication come?
So the challenge with communication after the 30th is your email gets turned off. You as a federal employee, if you're an non-accepted, meaning you're furloughed, you don't get email communication. You can't use your work phone. It's actually a violation of the Anti-Deficiency Act because there's no funding for you to open your work phone. And that's a whole different story. And I'm going to write about it in my federal report this week. So let's not jump too far ahead of ourselves. But in the same time, agencies are sending that message out. I spoke with 3 separate agencies just yesterday. One, Commerce Department sent it out. I know the Homeland Security sent out messages already. I know that the IRS Treasury was in the process of sending stuff out. And interestingly enough, the Army hasn't sent anything else out. So we're waiting kind of to hear about where agencies are. I think more communication will come today. And this poll was done earlier in the week. We heard from more than 850 federal employees and contractors. It was an online poll. It was a pretty quick and dirty poll to get people, okay, what do you know right this moment? So I think communication will be improved as we get closer to the shutdown.
In the absence of communication, people end up being in a situation where they go to the worst possible thoughts that happen in their head. That same poll talked about what are some of the biggest concerns that federal employees face right now as this shutdown looms. Tell me a little bit about the results of that poll, what the concerns of federal employees are based off of what you found in this study.
Interestingly and not surprising, the biggest concern is when am I going to get paid? And I think that's not surprising. What the shutdown does is affect people's pay because you don't get paid until the shutdown ends. People are going to have to work during the shutdown. You're still not getting paid. Bills don't stop during the shutdown, right? You still have to pay your mortgage. You still have health care to pay. You have child care to pay. And if you, for instance, say, okay, I'm not going to send my child to child care for this week or month or however long it lasts, you may lose your spot. Well, good luck getting another spot, especially in the DC metro area where we know, and I think most places, getting childcare is not easy. So the other thing to consider is around the idea of how long this shutdown will last. And I think that was another big area that people said, I think there's a lot of, okay, will this last again, a day, a week, a month? What we saw previously is they lasted much longer than anyone wanted to. And I think that has a downward effect on everything that the government does and the people.
One thing we report on a lot, and there's several million federal employees that are in federal unions, a lot of big information coming from the unions. What does being part of a union do or not do as it relates to being a member of the federal workforce during a shutdown?
For the most part, the union can help negotiate, or they have pre-negotiated contracts that talk about what can go on. But I think a lot of it is the union can pressure Congress. The union can have rallies. I think we're going to, especially if the shutdown lasts more than a few days, I think the AFGE, NTU, and National Federation of Federal Employees, all of them, among other good government groups, will really start pressing hard and get the word out to really say, hey, like, this is the impact that Congress is having by having that shutdown on Americans everywhere, not just federal employees, but people, who work at the FDA and do meat inspection, right? Or the people who work at national parks, or the people who make sure that HUD can hand out Section 8 vouchers. All of that has a downward effect. And I think that's where the unions really are playing the big role to really communicate this real impact. Again, not just for Washington, D.C., not just for a few feds or a few 100,000 feds, but for everyday Americans. And I think you've seen that build up over the last week and a half, or on Twitter, or what we call X now, I think, on LinkedIn, where we're today, on Facebook, on Reddit and social media. We've seen a lot of push for the unions to say, hey, this is not a federal employee. This is an issue. This is a America issue. So
when you relate that to an America issue, all kinds of news outlets are following the federal government shutdown, what impact that has on people, money, all kinds of different things. And as we follow the money, it's the money and the people in the federal government that are impacted. You can submit questions on federalnewsnetwork.com website at any time. Our journalists are responding to those questions. One of the most common questions we get is, when will I get paid? Will my paycheck be affected? Will my benefits and TSP be impacted? What answers do you have for the people in the money question?
We'll definitely push them back to federalnewsnetwork.com. My colleague Drew Friedman has done a wonderful job of keeping up a Q&A, trying to answer all questions and answers, and we're getting more in every day, that we keep updating our Q&A. In the meantime, let's start with the easy one. When will they get paid? Well, when the shutdown ends. Probably a week.
So no paycheck during a shutdown.
Correct.
But they're guaranteed the pay after the shutdown at some point.
Correct. Congress passed the law, I think it was in 2019 or 2020, that would guarantee pay after a shutdown. Previously, federal employees always got paid, but it was not guaranteed in law. So this is guaranteed in law, which is a good thing. Those agencies that have money already, that they have appropriations either left over from 2023 or are fee funded, those employees will continue to get paid now. It's only the employees that are suffering from a lapse of appropriations, those agencies. So they will get paid. TSP doesn't change. You still, your investments stay liquid. And the TSP actually does a really nice job of helping federal employees who may need a low interest loan or a zero interest loan, or to do some sort of pull from their TSP that they can repay later during a shutdown. We see that with a lot of different organizations, whether it's federal credit unions or FIA, the Federal Employee Assistance Fund. So we're seeing a lot of help out there that's really growing. And I think the other piece that I think is important when it comes to pay is retirement doesn't stop either. A lot of feds are maybe saying, I'm going to retire on September 30th. You can still retire. You can still process your paperwork, but be patient. Not only are OPM is already backlogged and sometimes struggles to process your paperwork, it may take a little longer because, again, is processing an accepted or non-accepted job? Probably not accepted. I mean, they probably will be furloughed.
Well, so as we follow the money, one of the places that the federal government spends the most money is on contractors. Government contracts, many of them really important to operating the mission of government, business, and in some cases, contractors sit at desks and you wouldn't know the difference between the contractor and the federal employee themselves operating those departments. What happens to federal contractors and federal contracts as a whole?
There's a few things that happen. Let's start with, this is really bad for contractors. Now, I know woe is the contractor making profits, millions of dollars, blah, 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 but let's just call it like it is. They will not get paid. There is no back pay. And if an agency says, we don't have any money on this contract anymore, everything stops. If I remember in the 2018, 2019 shutdown, a lot of contractors that we talked with said, well, we're doing the best we can. A large contractor may be able to keep it going because they have a reserve. Small businesses, service disabled veteran-owned businesses, hub-zone businesses, 8A businesses, they may not have as big of a reserve, and they may have to say, okay, do we have to furlough our people? I remember, again, going back a few years ago, a lot of people took training. They really focused on saying, oh, do your cyber training, do your training for a new certification for technology. So I think there was a big push there.
So it sounds like that the contractor might be in a more precarious position. One, no guaranteed communication, specifically Monday. Are they going to get communication from the government on their contract, or the government's going to communicate with their contracting business that then is ideally communicating with them? Are they going to have access to the building that they might be working in? Or are they going to have communication with the people in government that they work with and for?
A lot of questions.
A lot of questions. Precarious.
Let's start with the easy one. What will potentially happen, and it could be happening again today, Saturday into Monday, is the contractor will be told, especially service contractors, is there money on your contract? And the answer is maybe, maybe not. A lot of agencies have one-year funding, meaning it expires on September 30th. A lot of agencies have multi-year funding. Sometimes you have a reserve that you can carry over, and we have enough money for this contract for another month, for another 6 weeks, for another week, who knows? So they'll be told what's going to happen. If there's no money, you get a stop work order, stop work, stop doing what you're doing. So I think that's one of the things a lot of the vendors will be looking out for. The other thing around industry is, do you have access to the building? And the answer is not if you don't have money for your contract. If there's no money for your contract, like a federal employee who's furloughed, you can't come in, you can't do anything. So there's a lot of questions out there. The biggest challenge is when there's two other things that I think is really important. When government opens up and you have been working, you've been submitting your invoice. There's a deluge of invoices on the financial management, the CFO, the contracting officer's desk they have to process. So that adds to the delays to get contractors paid. So you may say, well, it's usually I get paid in 30 days. I may not get paid for 45 days or 60 days. And then your company, because I'm your contractor, right, has to process that money and then pay me. So I may even have to wait 8 weeks or 9 weeks. And I think that's a huge issue that I don't think Congress takes into account, that a lot of agencies don't take into account. And definitely when you talk about a lot of coverage in the media, the bigger media doesn't take into account. You know what we do? We take into account because we know what the contractors do.
Well, and that goes back to our mission, is providing the help for federal employees to do their mission. One of the things that is happening at Federal News Network, 1 week from today, all of our employees will definitely get paid. So I want to make sure you know that all of our employees are getting paid. No furloughs, no changes in status of working environment at Federal News Network. In fact, if you're on our website right now, we do have some open positions for those people who are looking to potentially change jobs. Federal News Network has some open positions. Next thing I want to get into real quick here is federal events. One of the things that's become a huge business in this marketplace, and an event coming up in a couple of weeks, AUSA, 30 to 35,000 people at the Washington Convention Center here in DC, announced this week that their event is on as planned, regardless of how often, how long, where we are in the shutdown status. Are federal employees allowed to go to events? Are events still happening? Are speakers from federal government going to be able to give speeches at these events? What does that look like?
A lot of the events will be canceled or postponed or be pushed off because as we're finding out ourselves as we do webinars and the like, a lot of people just can't work. And it doesn't look good if you are furloughed and you show up, or you're not furloughed, but you still show up at an event because there's a lot of your staff that's not furloughed. And the idea is, well, how do you have time to show up at an event when there's only 3 of you managing the IT world or doing budgeting or something like that? So I think events are going to struggle. We're going to see a lot of last minute discussions. I was just at the FC Nova event just yesterday, and even they were saying, well, we have Navy IT Day coming up in early October. We're not sure what's going to happen there. We hope the shutdown will be done by then, but if not, we may have to postpone. And Jeffrey, as you know, there's a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of the trickle down effect happens, right? The money that gets paid to the hotel, the staff that works in the hotel, the people who prepare the food, the people who set up and clean and break down the tables, the people who do the sound, right? Sound is so important at a good conference. All of that has a trickle down effect. I think that's the big concern when you talk about events. What's it do to the economy? And again, not just in DC, but Huntsville, Alabama, Seattle, Washington, Boston, San Diego. There's federal employees in all those places, and there's events at all those places.
Well, one of the things that people don't really think about in context of what you're thinking about each day is the just magnitude of different types of jobs within the federal government. Jobs that interact with citizens, jobs that interact with state governments, jobs that interact with foreign governments, and a lot of this comes to a grinding halt. It sounds like one of the big things is just everything just gets pushed back, but we don't even know how long and what happens in the meantime. Bringing this back to the beginning of the conversation as where we stand right now, how quickly can our Congress act to make something restarting those gears and wheels? How do you get that communication? Hey, we're back. Be in at 8:30 in the morning. What does that look like?
How quickly can Congress act? That's the $1 billion question that I'm not sure anyone knows. What tends to happen is when a shutdown is going to end, because there's again, Federal News Network, other media outlets begin reporting, oh, they're closer to a deal. It looks like the Republicans and the Democrats have found common ground and the president is supporting it. And I think the temperature rises as we get into the shutdown. There's more pressure on Congress to act. So I think a lot of federal employees will know when that's going to happen. Again, it's got to get passed by the House, passed by the Senate, signed by the president. Now, all that can happen in minutes or hours, but it doesn't always happen quickly. So what tends to happen, what we've seen in previous shutdowns, is the next day, maybe the day after the next day, because really by the time it's passed at midnight on a Tuesday, the president signs it Wednesday, so the government really doesn't officially open. And so Thursday makes sense for get people to come in. So I think there's a little bit of delay. And one thing that's really important that people have to understand is that to ramp back up from a shutdown, it's not just a 1-for-1. Okay, we were shut down a week, we'll take a week to catch up. It's more like 4-to-1, 4 weeks for every week you're shut down. Because again, as I mentioned, like the contractors' invoices, that backlog grows. It's not like, oh, we're going to bring in 10 more people to work the backlog. It's still just Jeffrey and Jason there working the backlog, and we can only sign things and get them through the process as quickly as possible. The pay can't get through. What we saw in the previous shutdowns is another example is they actually had to bring people back earlier to deal with stuff like payroll. Well, we have money for these appropriations, so we have to pay these people. We got to bring them back earlier, or to turn the systems back on. No system, as we know, gets turned off, but they get taken down, and there's a ramp up that's needed.
Now, we have our government shutdown historian, Tom Temen. He's not with us here right now today, but Tom can tell you everything that makes each government shutdown slightly different. This one, you already mentioned that the government employee is guaranteed to get the pay. At some point when the shutdown ends, they'll be paid. That wasn't the case in previous shutdowns. What else would need to happen to make this a historic shutdown, different than other shutdowns that have taken place in the past?
I think every shutdown's historic. The fact that we're the only nation, I think, in the world that suffers through this, and that this is happening more often, that they think this is the right, Congress thinks this is the way to get their way. It's really affecting millions of people, and not just millions of federal employees, but contractors too. I think the difference between, let's say, 2023, what we're walking into, and let's say 2018 and 2019, that was the longest one ever, 35 days across into the new year. But there was a partial shutdown back in 2018 and 2019. They had passed bills for the Defense Department, for the Veterans Affairs Department, maybe a few others. So some employees were working, not every employee. Again, that was a non-accepted, accepted, we're not getting paid. So this is considered a full shutdown versus a partial shutdown. 2013, as an example, that was another example of a full shutdown where there was no appropriations bills passed. There was the funding only was, again, fee-based agencies or those folks that were considered accepted that were working. I think the other big issue that you brought up, and I think that's really important, is Congress did fix that issue of making sure federal employees got paid. In fact, I just saw a bill today from Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia and Mark Warner from Virginia that they are introducing a bill to make sure contractors get paid. Now, will that bill get passed before the shutdown? No, of course not. Will it get passed ever? I don't know. But the fact is they recognize that this is an impact on the contractors as much as it's an impact on federal employees. So I think that's another big difference there, understanding.
A lot of interesting news coming in on the feed here. I know that the newsroom here is very busy covering a lot of stuff. What are some of the best ways that you as a federal employee contractor can keep in touch with Federal News Network to be up to date with the most recent events or activities that we're reporting on?
We're multi-channel. Exactly. You know that. But for folks who may not, we know that we can deliver your news through federalnewsnetwork.com, of course. We are offering newsletters, of course. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can get it to your government account. You can get it to your personal account. I think that's an important way. And obviously, you can find us on 1500 AM in the DC metro area. And of course, online, all our programs are online. And of course, if you want to download it, we can do a podcast too. We got plenty of information. Federal News Network Newscast is one of our highest downloaded podcasts. So don't forget to listen and learn more. And of course, you can always just email us.
For sure. So last thing is prediction time. We're in a place where we're playing countdown roulette. How long does it take for this to end? We're not there just yet. Maybe it doesn't happen. It's looking less and less likely like we avert this, but how long until we get a resolution and know when this thing is over? Jason Miller, you're on the spot right now, executive editor, Federal News Network. Jason Miller thinks this shutdown lasts how long?
My gut tells me a week. My little voice inside my head says 4 to 6 weeks. But I'll go with my gut because what I've been told from folks on Capitol Hill, we heard from Congressman Don Beyer from Virginia just earlier in the week on the federal drive. I also talked to some folks who have some contacts on Capitol Hill, and they said that there's a procedure thing that they're talking about. I'll call it a procedure motion they can do to help push the Senate CR through. And then that, because it already has bipartisan support in the Senate, and then the president obviously is probably also going to be supportive of it, that they're going to use a procedure motion to push the CR through. How quickly they can do that, some people say it could be a matter of days. Some people I've talked to could be as much as a week or more. But listen, it's Capitol Hill. You never know what's going to happen.
And with that, we have a question on LinkedIn Live that I know the answer to, which is the members of Congress are getting paid during the government shutdown.
Members of Congress are, but the staff are not.
Yeah.
And I saw a tweet just recently about they're going to shut down, for instance, the gym. Woe was them, not going to be cleaned. There's going to be limited trash and recycling and pickup. There's a lot of change that will happen to the staff. And so let's not forget about the staff who work on Capitol Hill. You could say they're part of the problem or a part of the solution, but they're going to be impacted just like federal employees, and they have to work too, mostly.
For sure. Well, when we look at this, we're going to let you come back to the newsroom. This is the busiest time of the year. Over 500,000 people have already accessed the Federal News Network Government Shutdown Resource Center. We're there for you on our website. We're there for you on LinkedIn, where we are right now, YouTube, Twitter, X, anywhere you
Reddit.
need to get that. Reddit.
Don't forget Reddit.
Follow us at federalnewsnetwork.com. We'll keep you updated with what takes place with Government Shutdown 2023. Jason Miller, executive editor, thank you.
My pleasure.